So the literature review that you conducted was the original um, was based on a question that many of you relayed back to the original paper I gave you. You don't have to, you didn't have to use the original paper I gave you. That was just to get you going, to get you started, to familiarize yourself, you all with the expectations of your final paper. Okay, so um, it seems like some of you stuck with the same topic. You didn't have to. So at this point, on Friday, I expect you to submit your proposal for research. So at this point, you should be submitting the research question that you choose to pursue for your research project. Now, you did submit a literature review with a bunch of papers. Those papers were derived or acquired using your search strategy that I showed you could break down from your research question. But in the very document, let me open the document. Okay. Where did I save it? I'm gonna end up showing somebody's work here. Oh, document where you put the literature review. Um, I want you to include all this information, and then you're going to put your search strategy in this one here in I that you originally used, if you used, the one that you used. However, after you acquire some papers, there's a few other things that you should be doing. Okay, so let's go through those. And I did show you, but I'll repeat. I think most of them are repeated. So you're going to get papers, you're going to use your search strategy, but then from there, you might not be getting exactly what you want. So I was talking to a student yesterday that couldn't find many papers. Well, that's good because if you're putting all the terms in your search strategy like from the research question and very few papers are arising, it means that your paper is or your research question is unique. Okay, so it's that's good. So then what's one of the criteria? What you're researching should be unique, it should be novel, it should be new. Okay, but then how do you find papers? Well, then what you have to do is you have to go topic by topic and find or term like keyword by keyword and look for papers that are on the topic that have been done in the past, but maybe not by combining all the concepts you're combining. Okay, so in this case, it's looking at in insurance cycles in a more high-tech, in the kind of environment that we have today, looking at the effect of technology on improving estimation and by insurers, right, to avoid or to adjust premiums so that there aren't those those losses, those cycles of losses by insurance companies. That's a simple way to, is that accurate, Raul, how you would describe that? So maybe nobody's looked at exactly that, but they've measured the insurance cycle in the past. They've measured underwriting in the past. What are the variables they use? Where did it come from? Where did the data come from to measure that? Those are the questions you're going to delve into and that you want to explore. So how do you do that? So I'm going to just go through the things I said before, and I'll put it in the chat. Um, so the first thing, to find papers, use a complete search strategy as described, right, in class. But then among that search strategy in Google Scholar, you can, and some students recognize this. Let me open Google Scholar. Okay, so if you want, and some of you understood the concept of literature review or systematic literature review, if you want those, why would you want those? You want those because someone may have already pursued your topic in the past and they already did a literature review. So to get those out of the 2,500 articles that you see here, you guys can see my Google Scholar, right? Is it true? Yes, Natalia, you say yes. Press here, review articles, and this will limit it to literature reviews. And we have, look at that, 85. Now, they might not be exactly the topic, remembering that you put the keywords that you want, the most important ones first. And let's say, let me go back a second. Let me change this. I'm gonna just add regression at the beginning. So some of you I suggested we're not even getting regression. So you need to put regression, at least the word regression. Oh, see, he gets nothing if I do that. If I put it at the end, it'll appear. But if I put it first, it doesn't look like it's big. Anyway, so you could put regression in there because you want to find analysis that was conducted with regression. So if you just want review articles, so literature reviews, there he gets 85 and he can go through. See, they all say systematic review or an overview or an overview. This might not be systematic review. So they already did a literature review, and this was published in 2019. So they, might be interesting to download it because it's going backwards from 2019. So it might be worth to download. So you download it, you look at it, and you look at the papers that it covered. Are any of them relevant for your research? So this is a way to get systematic reviews, something that will before today's date, somebody may have already done a literature review and a systematic one, which means it's much more thorough and they account for um, why they included papers or excluded papers, etc. Okay, so I'm going to put that in the back in the chat. So number 2 is identify a systematic review or just a comprehensive literature review that was already published. It might not be exactly what you want, it may be related. And you do this, you click on review articles. Google Scholar. Okay, I put it in number 2. So that's a second way you can find articles that will cover all the past to date or to the date that it was published. And remember, Google Scholar ranks things in um, some sort of relevance, right? So you got to get your search strategy right to get what you want. Okay, so then the next thing that you can do from there, let's say this is great. This is, okay, applications of statistics in the field of general insurance. That's really broad. I don't think that's right. A survey of driving behavior, AI, and actuarial science, a review. Interesting. Cited by 70. And this is to 2021. Okay, so let's say this is relevant. Okay, let's say we find this relevant. We read this paper. We look at past, well, it might be hard to find because it's not listed here, but if you really want it, you can ask the library for it. And then what you can do after reading it, since it's only to 2021, maybe you want to know about 2022, 2023, 2024, 2025. You can do a forward search by clicking on cited by. So 70 other articles reference this paper. So if you click cited by, this is going to give you papers after 2021. This one is like, I guess this might be citing a 2021 paper, even though they published in 2020, because maybe the authors of the original paper, um, may have presented this research in earlier versions, and the authors of the citing paper may have seen them presented or read an earlier draft, so they quoted them. Okay, so these are all more recent, you see. So that's a way to follow into the future, like beyond when the paper was published, and find other papers. So this is going to be a third way of finding relevant papers. Um, okay, so if it's relevant, the idea is to find more papers more like what you were doing. So number 3 is to click cited by to find more recent papers that cited the original article but may have elaborated beyond what was done in the original article. Okay, so that's another way. I can refer to that as a forward search. So you're going to go back, then you're going to go forward from that paper. And the other thing you can do is, and in any of the papers you find, is go into the bibliographies, go into the references. As you read the paper, you may come across articles, like, because they'll be citing the paper, any paper you're reading will be citing other authors. So you may come across um, um, key papers. Okay, so that's number 4. Go into the references of the papers you have found to find papers. As you read the paper, you may come across key papers. As maybe I could say that in a better way, but I hope you understand. Okay, so those are ways of finding better, closer, more related papers for your project. And put that information in I. That's what's going to go in I. So if you use a search strategy to find a paper you use, leave that there. But if the subsequent paper is found by from the bibliography of a different one, you mention that below. Say, I found this paper I found, so number 2, I find this article because, not because of the search strategy, but you could say used. This is all of a journal for you, how you found papers, okay? Because I'm not requiring you to do a systematic review, but it's good to keep a record, to keep your head straight, because you're going to read so many papers, where you got them from and how they tie together. So used 1, found article by, and you can put, Jones et al. 2020, then in bibliography or in references found. So you just keep a record. Kelly et al. Okay, so you just keep a record for your sake as you go where you found things, so it's, you can find it again, or it's better documented. So that's the idea of this. So I want you guys to include in highlights. So highlights and comments in here, what you're going to put are not just one quote, like most of you guys just put one to fill it in, but here you're going to keep a record of any kind of quotations maybe that should go in your paper. Okay, so summary, like I also tell you to mention findings, right? And so some of you put quotes there, and that's good. And then anything else that stands out, you might put over here. Okay, so those are going to be used to write your paragraphs for now, and then ultimately your papers. Any questions about this, what I'm talking about? All right, so for your submission on Friday, I told you that I want you to give me, in an email I mentioned, I'm gonna write it down. Okay, so I want introduction, literature review, and so I want introduction, I want the literature review, I want methods and data. And I asked that you must write in English, though you could put it in Spanish and translate it to using whatever tool you want to put it in English. And I want it on, I want a page or two for each of the first two sections of your paper. The methods and data might take you longer to describe. Okay, so write up a page or two for each of the first so three sections of your paper. Okay. You might, I'm saying like 1 page minimum. Probably more likely you're gonna write 2 pages, and then and you could have more than that if necessary. But don't give me a lot. It should be concise. You might want to use AI to help you write, like Copilot, or you might use ChatGPT if you're comfortable, or you buy a subscription to help you massage or write your paper more clearly, or to do the translation. That's fine with me, but you need to quote it. You need to tell me that's what you used, all right? So be transparent about what you use. Like I said at the beginning of the course, I don't know where we're going with this AI as a tool in education. And just for now, just be transparent about how you've used it. You could even check your whole topic, not at the beginning, but towards the end, like see how AI would summarize your topic, and you'll be surprised how much your writing is much better. Okay? You will be surprised because you guys have done all this background and looking, and you become sort of an expert in your topic. So, what else do I want to say about this? Okay, so what are you going to include? Do you guys know what you're going to include in your intro, literature review, and methods? Use the critique that I gave you to guide you. Okay, so the layout of the critique, let me share that again. So in your literature review, in your introduction, you're going to mention, so this could be for the intro, right? You're going to put something about your problem, and you're going to mention any subproblems. Maybe, like we talked about last class, maybe you have more than one question you're pursuing, or maybe you have more than one hypothesis. So, if relevant, it should be there. So that would be like in your intro, but not at the very top of your intro. If you read the papers, you'll notice that there's a little bit of drama, right? So they talk about the background, the problem, the setting, the context, and then they talk about how they're going to tackle it. So what is the problem that they're going to pursue? So this might be in the intro. Okay, so then what about this one? Where would this go? Would this go in the intro, literature review, or the methods and data? Where would this comment go, or something about this? What do you think? The problem is adequately narrowed down into a researchable problem. Okay. It could go into the intro, but how are you going to prove it's narrow enough? The literature review will help you with that. So you're going to surround, this concept with the literature, and you're going to show that, some people did something similar, other people did something else, and you have found a much more narrow way to tackle this problem. Okay, so that you're going to do that precisely with the literature review. You might mention it. It might sound, like a good research question in the intro, but you have to prove it in the literature review. Okay, so I would say evidence in lit review.
Professor, but how many evidence do we have to provide in the literature review? Like, is there like a minimum?
I'm not going to give you guys numbers. It has to be
Okay.
complete. It needs to be, I don't know why, my Anthony, your sound is so low. So what Anthony said, oh, my sound is low. So what Anthony said was how many articles or how many references do we need to provide to include to be considered adequate evidence? It should be complete. Um, so I mentioned before that your lit review is complete when the papers you found sort of they say the same things and you have your patterns. Remember, you got to talk about patterns in your lit review. Okay, so how many? Not one, that's for sure. More is better, but I understand the time constraints. So you should have key papers that defend, what you're doing as narrow, and the researchable part is going to also be established in the methods and data section, because you're going to show me that you have the data, that you know the model you're going to run. So that's kind of both of those. Okay, I hope you're getting the hang of this. Okay, the problem is significant. How are you going to show that the problem is significant? That's a little bit of intro and lit review, right? You're going to mention the background and how important this is, and who it's going to impact, who your audience is for this topic, and and you're going to argue this is significant and worthy of research. So that's going to be both, I'd say, intro and lit review. The relationship between identified problem and previous research is clearly described. Where do you think that's going to go? Right, right. So you're gonna provide evidence about the relationship has been described in such a way in the past, and then how you're going to single out your research as unique or distinct in the intro, again, intro and lit review.
Professor,
Uh-huh.
what is the main difference between literature review and introduction?
The introduction is focused on the story, okay? So that's a good question. So you're going to tell the story. You're going to say, um, um, you can talk about your seminal paper maybe and say, okay, so like in the example I showed before, there's a history of literature on the topic of insurance and the underwriting cycle of insurance. But today we have technology that's not even, that's beyond what anybody imagined could exist in the past. and you tell the story. Like that's where you do the storytelling. The lit review is a little more step by step, where you start unraveling and describing how people have looked at it in the past, what they found, like details, right? So intro is more the story behind your research question. Am I answering it? So read, just take an article that you like among the ones that you're trying to understand that you found and read the intro and the lit review and see the difference. Okay. So the intro is more of a storytelling, and you might have references in there, but the lit review is where you go um, much more in detail and overview what's been done before and what they found, combining all the papers together, the pattern. So here, let's talk about the lit review more detailed. So the lit review should be logically organized. I mean, so this is all about the literature review, this portion. Um, so this is all literature review. I don't have to specify. The review provides a critique of relevant studies. Okay, so how are you going to check that? Well, the person who's doing the critique, what they could do is they could, since they don't know the topic so well, could go into AI and see what AI gives them in terms of literature on the topic, and see if the person that they're critiquing has come up with those papers. Okay. So did they miss the key papers? Where are the key papers? So they can do a quick search of that. So you guys should be feeling like, how are you going to do this by Friday, right? So if you guys need more time, I can extend this to Monday, but I really want you to aim at least to have your papers done by Friday, and then the critique could be on Monday. That could make sense. It's going to be hard to have the critique with the the written paper, the free sections all on Friday. So I can split that up. I can split that up for you. I'll put it on the website, on Moodle, that you have the papers to me by Friday, and then because your partner has the paper, they can do the critique, and so can you, of them. Okay, gaps in knowledge about research problem are identified. So now you're going to position here. It should be positioning your research question among the literature showing there's no one who studied Puerto Rico, or there's no one who looked at the effect of technology on underwriting cycles, or there's no one. So that's where that has to be there. Okay. And that's going to be shown with the lit review. You should, because this is a undergraduate class, I'd like you to mention the search strategy included and the databases that you used. And then whether you did any of the things I wrote in the chat, you can just write it up and say, we did a forward search. I conducted a bibliographic review of papers found. So you just, you don't have to be so detailed, but mention any of those things that you did, as I described 1, 2, 3, and 4 earlier in the class today. You use a search strategy. You looked for systematic reviews. You looked inside the references. You did a forward search with cited by, and then that's what you can say. You can make a sentence about that. Okay, the keyword search produced a thorough search. The person that you're critiquing in your own paper, you should feel satisfied that you got what you wanted. You should know what that is, okay? You should know that you're getting what you're looking for. And if you didn't, you got to keep searching. And the person conducting the review should be able to establish that too. So you got to establish that, right? That you found that relevant papers, relevant references are included. So this is kind of saying the same thing. This is really, really, really important that you provide a summary of what you found. in the literature review. What is the pattern? Are 3 articles saying the same thing? Okay, so I asked you to have 20 minimum for your paper on Friday, but I'm going to even expect more by the time you finish this paper, okay? But I'm allowing 20 for this week. And you're going to talk about the patterns. You're going to summarize. And how are you going to do that? You're going to look at your Excel spreadsheet and how you, the quotes, the results, the countries that were studied and not studied. That's all going to be mentioned in patterns. That should be in your literature review. So all of these things should be mentioned in your lit review. Okay. Questions so far? Okay, where would we put information about theoretical and conceptual framework? Where should that go? So a mention of all the past theories and how they are combined for your paper. Which section should those go in?
I believe method and data.
It could be, I think in the literature review, and then mentioned again in the methods. Yeah. So you're going to remember your lit review is more elaborate that you can go with methods. You want to talk about the statistics and the models, right? So it would be nice to mention this in the lit review first. And then you operationalize with a conceptual framework in your methods. Okay? So you don't want your paper to be too long, right? So you got to be really efficient. You don't want to repeat yourself too much. Like you want to mention your point and what you're doing, but you do it in the right places and you don't have to be repetitive. So theoretical framework can go in the lit review and then mentioned in the methods section. And then here in the methods, you're going to operationalize and provide the conceptual and operational frameworks where you say what you did in the context of your problem. So you're getting the idea. We're dividing that what people did before and like the theory we're drawing from, that will be in the lit review, but what we're going to do about it is in the methods. Okay, so then we get into the research variables. Where's this going to show up? Independent and dependent variables are defined. Should be in the methods, right? Methods and data. So you guys, this should be a good guide for you to follow. And of course, you're going to write more around this to make it flow together, but these things have to at minimum be there. Are you dealing with any confounding variables? Remember, you don't have to run the model for Friday. I just want you to tell me what you think you're going to do so I can check it. I need to be able to check it. Okay. Methods, hypothesis. Where is this going to go? My hypotheses are clear, testable, and specific. So you might have more than one. So it says hypotheses. Um, as I mentioned last class, this should be in your methods. This should be in this, has to be in your methods. And it should be possible for you to find evidence against your hypothesis. If you state a hypothesis in the status quo as the literature presents it today, you should be able to find evidence against it, or else it's not a feasible study and it's not worthy of our time. Okay. So you can say whatever you want asking questions, but do you have the data to test it and prove it wrong or reject the null hypothesis? That's what we have to establish there. Each hypothesis describes a predicted relationship between two or more variables included in each hypothesis. So make sure that you don't have too many questions in a hypothesis. It should be a predicted relationship between two or more variables per hypothesis. Okay, so if you think that the relationship between inflation and credit card debt is positive, that's one question. And you can include there other variables that should be in your model. And how do you get that list of variables? From the literature, right? So the literature might, to describe these relationships that you found, yes, this is going to be mentioned in the hypothesis, but those relationships and what was found before should have been mentioned in the lit review. Okay. So even though you're going to identify them and pin them down with what variables you're going to study in what data set you're using, these relationships should have been mentioned. Lit review should have summarized past research if it existed. If it doesn't exist on what you're doing, you say there was a gap. This this relationship was not studied before, and I'm going to study it now. So I'm going to put this up as a guide onto the platform. This is going to be our guide for assignment or for proposal. Okay. So whatever you talked about in the literature review, you could talk about so many things. You've read so many papers. There's so much to talk about. All I want you to talk about is your research question and what you found in literature. Be very filter, stay on topic. Don't stray from the topic because you could spend pages and pages. That's why I should limit you on the pages, but if you're writing and writing and writing like pages and pages, something's wrong. You're not on your point. You have to stay on the point. Okay. Oops. Okay, so the hypothesis logically flows from the theoretical or conceptual framework. So there should be a tie-in between what you mentioned in the theoretical framework of in the literature review should tie with the hypothesis that you come up with. Okay, it should flow from what you already wrote. So all of this is in methods and data. Methods Data. Okay, so 6, sampling. You know, we're not going to do sampling, but somebody else did where we got the data from. So let's see, which ones should we include as just at least the sample size should be mentioned. Selection. So how are you going to know section description of the site and participants well described? So you should mention for your data section, right? So in methods and data, you should include where your data is coming from. So some students in the lit review that they submitted were telling me about papers that had survey data. You're not going to be able to get most of those surveys. There are survey data available online. You want to find ones that you can access that's publicly available if you have a survey. And if a survey was used, you should mention what the selection, like how they acquired the data, who are the participants, and things like that. But finance data is can be acquired like the FINRA data, and then you have like I say, the CompuStat firms data and Bloomberg economy and firm data. That's both in CompuStat and in Bloomberg. So you should be able to describe that. You should be able to tell me that your sample size, about your sample size, and that it's accurate. That should be in your methods and data too. And how will you know that your methods are good? Well, someone did it before to solve a similar problem to yours. That's why you have the literature review. So again, this is tying back to the lit review. What you're doing should be mentioned there. The sample is representative of the defined population. So with finance data, you can look at, because it's time series, you can look at it over, you can look at data, depends if it's stock return, something like that. It could be daily. And when you take daily data, there's different ways to get daily data. You can get it at the closing. You can get it as an average. So there's different ways to specify the data that you're using, or sorry, your different ways to operationalize or like not collect. What am I trying to say? There's different options, okay, of the timing of the data that you want to use. And you could also have weekly data. You could have quarterly if you're using financial reports. Um, If you're going to do something over the year, you could use annual data, but many years. So all of that needs to be described. And how are you guys going to figure that out? You're going to refer to papers that did similar things before. Okay, you're not going to make this up out of nowhere. Your fourth year students, it's a fourth year course. I don't expect you to make this up. I don't expect you to come up with your own out of nowhere. You're not reinventing the wheel. Papers take years to publish. That's why we're going to use them, okay? So hopefully with what you submit to me on Friday, you're going to show that you have a strategy that you got somebody else did, and you're going to do something similar. So this, you know, make sure that what you have is going to capture what you're looking at. So think about that. The method for selection of samples. So you're not going to do this. This is not applicable because you're not going to be sampling. Likely you're not sampling. If you are sampling, you're going to have to let me know, but I don't think you're sampling. So maybe you have a large database and you want to randomize from there and collect a sample from there. I don't think this is applicable though. We'll leave that out. Any sampling bias is in the chosen method is acknowledged. Yeah, that might be relevant. It might not. You guys will have to mention if there's any concern of sampling bias that maybe you're collecting information and like this is really important here because in your paper you should mention in your discussion section and your conclusion, well, more in the discussion section of your paper that we'll talk about after this week, you're going to talk about limitations. And if there's a bias in what you got, let's say you're not able to get exactly the data you want, that you know that it's confounded by um, some factors. So let's say you want information. I'm trying to think about the papers you guys are working on. Um, if you believe any of the variables have some sort of sampling or bias, or they're not exactly what you want, but they're similar, that's where you can mention that here, okay? And then that can be used later to put into your limitations of your paper or any. So nobody's going to be able to conduct a perfect research study. All of them are going to have some limitations. And so you got to mention that later. So be aware of those kinds of limitations early on to be prepared for criticism or to write about how it limits your results or the impact of your research. Okay, so you should be clear about how you took your sample, where you got it from, all of that. Okay. Okay, the research design is about the model, right? So this is about the model here. So all of this should be in methods and data. Okay. All right, so that's it. This is the last one. This is all methods, right? You want to be able to explain the model. Again, your model that you use. Um, and you should mention the model that you're going to use in the lit review, but with more details in the methods and data section. Try not to be repetitive, so you mention it once and then you talk about it in more detail in the methods and data. The design, so you didn't do an experimental design or a survey design, you just have uh, the model. So whatever these questions are, relate them back to the model that you use. Assumption underlining the design. Okay, so all models have assumptions. Aha. If you watched all the Z statistic videos, you finished the the modeling for your assignment, and then it got into, I think, let me see which video it was. It talks about the assumptions of the regression model and testing the assumption of the regression model. And you're going to have to talk about that. Oh, am I cutting out? You're going to have to discuss that. Okay, you're going to have to discuss that you conducted a test of the assumptions. So if you didn't get there, you're going to have to go through that, and we can talk about that. Um, we can talk about that more next week or even this week about the assumptions of the model, because tomorrow is Thursday. I want to talk about data tomorrow. Maybe there's time to do this and talk about the assumptions. So let me verify. The video was video number 7, regression assumptions. And then 7, 8, 9, 10 are all about testing those assumptions and how you improve your regression to meet the assumptions of the regression model. Okay, so that's where that would go. So check or watch Z statistics 7 to 10. So he takes time to go through that. How many of you watched that? Tell me in the chat. Or did you just watch what you needed to get the assignment done? You're going to need to test these assumptions and mention that you do when you do the actual analysis. This is not going to be for this. I'm going to say this is, you can just mention it. You can just say something like the usual assumptions of linear models will be tested or something. Okay. Nice to see most of you guys are here. Okay. Okay, questions about that? So, but when you in the final paper, so you would do this. So I mentioned to you, just like you did for the last assignment, you're going to create several models. You're going to improve upon one model on, improving the fit with additional models. And then you need to test the assumptions along the way and of the final model. Like you're going to be improving your model to satisfy those assumptions. All right, so watch those videos. So this is here the role of the researcher. So wait, let me put methods and data here. This is more for if you have a team, but you guys are not in a team. So if you are in a team working on a paper, you would have to say what everybody is doing on the paper. So I'm going to say that's not applicable here. What about this? The research addresses issues related to the internal and external validity of the study. Let's leave that as NA, not applicable right now. We'll talk about that. Um, skip this for now because this is more related to design. See if it fits for the final paper. And then I'm not going to say not applicable because it might come back and haunt you. Generalizations that will be possible as an outcome. Okay, this is really important. Who is the audience for your research? Who cares? This is the so what? Like, who cares about your research? How does it generalize to maybe you're doing something on Puerto Rico, or how does it generalize to other states, or how does it generalize to stock markets around the world, or how does it generalize to the economy? Okay, who is the audience for this research? Who will it impact? Who cares? Okay, that has to be mentioned. This actually fits in methods and data and will be really important in the discussion section of the paper, okay? It can also go into the it can go into the intro, methods and data. Sorry, I'm kind of out of order, but most of the stuff is in some sort of sequence. But you're going to try and say in the intro to get people's attention, who cares about this research, right? You're going to say who's going to care about this? Otherwise, they're not going to continue reading. Most people will read the abstract. I didn't ask you to do the abstract yet. That will be later. So anyway, for now, it's going to be in the intro, the methods and data about the generalizability of your research and who's going to care about it. Honestly, I feel like it should be in some way in the lit review too. So this is something that gets repeated to make your article or make your paper have a broader audience. That's what you want to do. Okay, and then limitations and delimitations are outlined. Okay, so that's going to be mentioning like the bias thing I mentioned above. It's kind of the same thing about saying what you can include and what you can't do everything in one project. So what you left out, if you took a subsample rather than looked at so many things. So let's say you wanted to do something on mergers and acquisitions, and there's lots of mergers and acquisition, but you want to stay in one sector. Okay, so you just want to look at one sector of the economy. Let's say you want to just look at healthcare industry. So you mention that, and then you say, this is all I wanted to look at. I only looked at large firms, large acquisitions. So you left certain things out. So as you define what you're going to look at, you're delimiting, you're leaving things out. So you're going to explain how you framed your analysis and what limitations that creates. So that should be that'll be in the methods and data, and it'll come up again for the discussion, etc. But I won't mention that right now. Okay, so you're going to define how you limited your research in the methods and data. All right, that's it. So there you go. That's what I want. I hope that helps. I'm going to put this like this up into the portal, into Moodle, so you guys can use it as a guide. All right, any questions for me? No questions?
Professor, I do have a question.
Yes.
Basically, I want to know what format did you want it? Like the liter literature review and the method and data part inside of the research proposal? Because I know we did the literature review in a spreadsheet.
Sorry,
So
Valeria, say it again. It's kind of cutting out. Say it again.
like what format did you want it? The literature review and the methods and data part inside the research proposal?
You're going to write it like it's going to be like the papers you're reading. They have an intro, literature review methods.
Okay, yeah.
That's how it's going to be
No,
like.
yeah. It's just that because we did like the literature review spreadsheet, like in a spreadsheet, that was like my question.
No, no, good. Yeah, good. I'm glad you asked it. It's confusing. No, the spreadsheet is just to organize things so that what you can do is when you have a lot of papers, you can sort in the different columns and try and see which papers said certain things. It just helps you look for patterns if you have a lot of papers. That's why I put it in a spreadsheet. But yeah, no, you're going to write it in a Word document, double spaced, and just like the papers you're reading, but not too many pages and at least one page per section that you're going to elaborate for your final paper. If you have 3 pages, great. If you have 20 pages per section, then you're just rambling. You shouldn't be rambling. You need to be precise with your words. Okay. So I'm going to change the Moodle site. I'm going to include this document and I'm going to put the proposals due on Friday and the critique due on Monday. That way everyone has a chance, but they should talk to their partner so the partner knows what they're doing and can advise, not advise, but offer criticism. And you guys keep in touch with me about any questions you have so we don't delay. Was this helpful today? Okay. Trying to make this as step by step as possible. All right, so I'm gonna let you guys go for the day, and tomorrow I will see you. And tomorrow maybe we can talk about the data. Let's focus on the data. Maybe you guys can tell me where you plan to get your data from. Can you put it in the chat so I can show you about how to get data in those places if you don't know? So, but in the chat right now, put where you're planning to get your data from. What was it, Bloomberg that you're planning, or is it um CompuStat, or do you have a survey? Do you know how to get survey data from the Census Bureau or from Puerto Rico Statistics or the Insurance Commission? So I can look at that with you, how you grab data out of there. Robert, it tells me Binance, Glassnode, Coin Market. Oh, now you're giving me homework. I can look at those. If that's the last one or only one, I'll have time to look at it. But let's see what else other people say. How to download data. No comments? You're gonna have to tell me by Friday, right? Am I cutting out? Is the sound shaky? I'm getting notification that my connection is unstable. Is that it, Robert? Oh, it's only one? Okay, Bloomberg. Okay, I'll show you how to get data from Bloomberg. Morale. Oh, you want economic data, right? You want to download economic data?
Yes, I was trying to get inflation and they divide it so that I could use that as different variables of inflation. So Bloomberg has that.
Okay. Do you know how to get it, or you just want me to show you too? Want to make sure you're doing it right.
I have my notes from the time I did the certificate on Bloomberg, so I
Okay.
kind of know my way around.
Okay. Okay. So let's do a little Bloomberg tomorrow. I can access Bloomberg on my computer, so I can share that with you. If you guys want to go to the lab, um, you can do that tomorrow. We can have the class. You can go to the lab, and I will project from here if you want. Otherwise, just you'll have the video and you can go to the lab with the video if it's helpful. Nobody else? You guys want to see CompuStat? No? That's it? You guys, let me help you. Otherwise, where are you getting data from? Do you know yet? You're going to know Friday? Well, Friday at least, Monday at least, we can focus on that. So what you're going to do for, well, you're working on your proposals, right? So if you do have time, well, this weekend you can do the Z statistics videos. I mentioned 7 through 10. That's 4 videos. And I can also talk about that next week is the looking at the assumptions of models. All right, so I'm gonna let you guys go. It's 10:20. Thank you for your feedback, and we will see you in the morning. Bye. Ciao.
Excuse me, Professor.
Robert.
Yes, I have one question about my research